Double slit experiment. It begins as a beam of photons, and you see a common theme here. We're talking about photons. They are the elementary stuff that atoms are made of, the stuff our world is made of. You and I are made of photons. Our world is made of photons, so it's not surprising that they would be used a lot throughout these experiments. So in the double slit experiment, a beam of light, photons, particles of light, was fired from a device, and it was fired at a barrier, and the barrier had two slits on either side. And what scientists expected to see was that once the light hit the barrier, it would go through both of the slits, and we would be able to see the patterns that it was creating in a very expected way on the other side. Well, this is where the mystery comes in. Because what scientists found is that when the light hit the barrier and it went through and it was being observed. Now, the observer could be another human, it could be a device watching it, but somehow the observation actually determined how those particles of light would behave. When no one and nothing was observing, the particles would behave in one way. When someone or a gadget was recording, the particles would behave in another way. And here's the difference. Under one set of circumstances, the particles remained particles. On another set of circumstances, the particles became waves. So now we're talking on a quantum level about the difference between the particles and waves. It's the same energy expressing in very, very different forms. Now, this is going to be really important because what we have just done is we've talked about the ability of humans to create the emotion that influences their DNA. It influences the stuff our world is made of. And now we're talking about the stuff our world is made of behaves differently. Sometimes it's a particle, sometimes it's a wave, depending on whether or not it's being observed. The implications for healing, the implications for prayer, the implications for remote healing within the context of these discoveries take on a whole new meaning. And if you think about this, we know scientifically that prayer has an effect. Many studies have been done, and the question was, how could a prayer in one person's living room for their loved one, their son or their daughter, their mother or father in a battlefield of Afghanistan, half a world away, how could the prayer have any influence on the other side of the planet? And yet it does. Statistically, what the studies were showing was that people fared better when they were ill or when they underwent a surgery. Those that had people praying for them fared better, recovered faster, had less trauma, less bleeding, less swelling, less bruising than those that did not. These are very, very well documented studies. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those. The question is, why does it happen? How does it happen? That's what we're spending time on. Because we're going to take this now to the next level. We're going to take it even further than we have in the past, because it begins to tie in to what we have called miracles in the past. You know, a miracle is only a miracle until we understand the science underlying what's happening. Then it becomes a technology, and it's something that we all have available to us. Although the observer effect was first documented during the first double slit experiments early in the 20th century, as happens so often with these very important experiments, this particular experiment was repeated later in the century using even better equipment with new ideas and new understandings. A piece of the puzzle that Einstein was never able to solve. He began early in the 20th century with his theories of relativity, and he was always searching for a unified theory, a unified field theory. And here's what I mean by that. In a unified field theory, it's where a scientist like Albert Einstein creates a single story that incorporates all of the facets of nature and physics and mathematics into one coherent story of us, our universe, and our relationship to it. The unified field theory has been an elusive theory. It is yet to be discovered. Einstein and the world supported Einstein, thinking that this is the man. If anyone could do it, he could do it. Here's where Einstein got stuck. And he actually admitted this on his deathbed in the early 1950s. He got stuck because he did not like the idea that we are so intimately connected with our universe that we could have any influence whatsoever on the universe in one place with us being in another place. And as I mentioned earlier, he actually had a name. He called this spooky action at a distance. He called this spooky action at a distance because to him it was spooky. One of the things I find particularly fascinating is that although Einstein was working with the same mathematics and the same equations as his friends and colleagues, he came to the conclusion that we are separate from one another and that we are separate from the universe and that we can be observers in the universe. However, a dear friend and colleague of Albert Einstein's, a man that lived much longer than Einstein and had a tremendously powerful influence in quantum physics at Princeton University in our world today, was Professor John Wheeler. He passed away just a few years ago. So John Wheeler and Albert Einstein, they were friends, they were colleagues, looking at the same equations, the same math, drawing vastly different conclusions. So while Einstein believed that we're separate and have no effect, Wheeler said just the opposite. And I want to share with you John Wheeler's exact words, just so you can hear his process and his thinking and how passionate he was about this. John Wheeler said, we had this old idea that there is a universe out there somewhere. And here's man, he called the observer, safely protected from the universe by what he called a 6-inch slab of plate glass. Okay, so it's not really plate glass, but that is his way of saying that there is something between us and the universe out there. But he continues. He said, now we learn that to even observe an electron, we have to shatter that plate glass. Listen to what he said. He said, so the old word observer simply has to be crossed off the books. He said, there are no observers. We must put in the new word participator. No observers, only participators. So what does this mean? I'm going to just very, very quickly encapsulate this idea and why it's so powerful in our lives. Because what John Wheeler has just said to us tells us that we will never find the smallest particle of matter, no matter how many atoms and quantum particles that we smash into one another and break into a bajillion pieces looking for smaller and smaller pieces, and we will never find the edge of the universe, no matter how far we look to the edge of the cosmos and how technologically sophisticated our equipment is. And here's the reason why. What John Wheeler just said to us is that every place that we look into the universe, every place that we look into nature with the expectation that something is there for us to see, the expectation is the principle that will put something there for us to see. So no matter how far, no matter how deep, as long as we're looking, the act of looking is the act of creation that makes sure there will always be something there for us to see. So what we've just witnessed are the science-based experiments and a real-life application of these experiments that not only confirm that we are deeply connected to the world, but also confirm that that connection is so fundamental. It begins at the very core of our existence with our DNA, where we interact with life and reality itself. And our